Welcome to video 7 of evolution versus creation, and I think you guys will find this video to be really interesting when it comes to dinosaurs, because we have been fed a certain narrative our entire lives that as soon as you think of dinosaurs, you think of millions and millions of years ago. These once prehistoric and massive creatures roamed the earth, and it's what we've been told again since we were little kids. And so I want to go through a number of things that, again, just reveal a different narrative and tell a different story than the one that we have been told ever since we were little kids. And dinosaurs, I think, are a pretty fascinating thing. Like, they're just, the size of them is almost hard to comprehend in a lot of them. And there are also, many, many different kinds of dinosaurs that were much, much smaller. But, the Tyrannosaurus rex and the Brontosaurus and the Stegosaurus and the Triceratops and all these different kinds of dinosaurs that we grew up hearing about, are just impressive in their size. And it's been a mystery. Like, there's been so many different theories about what happened to them and how they went extinct and why they're gone. And I'm going to go through a different approach that, looking at some evidence, looking at a lot of evidence, to be honest, all across the world, we see a different story. And the word dinosaur wasn't actually even invented until 1842. And the word was taken from two Greek words, the first being dinios, which means terrible or fearfully great, and then sauros, which means lizard. I was going to say wizard, not wizard. It means lizard. So a terribly great lizard. Since this was only invented in 1842, the Bible was obviously written way before this. And so that word dinosaur would have never appeared in the Bible, but I believe we do see it appear in another word, and that is the word dragon. And dragon and dragons are mentioned 34 times in Scripture. And there's numerous occasions where it's obviously talking about Satan, it's talking about the devil. But there are a number of other instances where it's referring to animals. And so, I'm not talking about necessarily the winged dragon that flew around and breathed fire everywhere. I'm not necessarily talking about that. But I think that the word dragon is the Bible's word that it uses to sometimes describe what I think are dinosaurs. And we actually see other places, like the book of Job, where it has to be describing a dinosaur. And God is describing this animal to Job. And so I'm going to show you these scriptures that, again, just show that dinosaurs are in the Bible. And if they're in the Bible and they're being described to people and they're being written by people, then these people obviously saw them and knew what the Lord was talking about. And so here we have God speaking to Job, and he doesn't use the word dragon in the next few verses I'm going to show you, but he does use some other words. And again, guys, think about what he's describing and the only description this could fit. So here the Lord speaks to Job and says, "Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you put him on a leash for your girls? Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him and remember the battle. You will never do it again. Behold, the hope of man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? He who was first given to me, or who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole of heaven is mine. And I will not keep silent concerning his limbs, or his mighty strength, or his goodly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with a bridle? Who can open the doors of his face with his terrible teeth all around? His back is made of rows of shields shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils come forth smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. In his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. The folds of his flesh stick together, firmly cast on him and immovable. His heart is hard as stone, hard as the lower millstone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. At the crashing, they are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him sling stones are turned to stubble, clubs are counted as stubble, and he laughs at the rattle of the javelins. Again, guys, what could God is not one who exaggerates or lies. He is describing a real animal here that Job would have been familiar with. And this is unlike anything that we see living today, and the only thing that matches its description is a dinosaur or a dragon. And I think it's interesting that, all across the world, we have different legends and stories of dragons all over the place. And so, when you think about animals that we do see today, like the bombarder beetle, for example, which I'll go through in another video, but it's this beetle that makes this chemical concoction within its body, and when something is trying to come and eat it, it has this chemical explosion that comes out and burns the thing that's trying to get it. And those chemicals are produced in its body and makes this explosion. Or we look at something like the firefly that has these different chemicals that make this animal give off light because of the chemical reaction. It's not crazy to think of an animal that could breathe out fire. When we actually look at other animals that do amazing things with different chemical reactions within their body, it's not actually crazy to think of a dragon that could breathe out fire. And I don't know for sure if that's what this scripture is referring to. It kind of sounds like it. But when we go back up to the top, and we look at when he says, who can open the doors of his face with its terrible teeth all around? His back is made of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. He is describing something that sounds exactly like a dinosaur and doesn't fit any other description of any animal that we have today. And so moving on, I wanted to show you one more that we find in the book of Job. Look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now, his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. He is the first of the ways of God. Look at this description, guys. There's no animal that we see that is alive today that fits this description. But there is an animal in the past that fits this description. So some people have referred to this Bible verse as thinking that it's talking about elephants or hippos. But remember that it says he swings his tail like a cedar. And that his power is in his belly and his loins. Its ribs are made of iron. What animal do you see here that fits that description? It's obviously the Brachiosaurus. That's the only animal that fits the description that God himself is describing to Job. And he said, I made him along with you. Dinosaurs have been with man from the beginning. And I'm going to show you that through archaeological discoveries. I'm going to prove this to you, so it's not just hearsay. But the Bible says that dinosaurs were there from the beginning. No other animal fits the description of a behemoth as this Brachiosaurus. There's no other animal. And so you look at that cedar tree on the right-hand side. That's a cedar tree. And again, God's saying he moves his tail like that tree. This is the only animal we've ever found that fits this description. And so I'm going to move on and just talk about what we've heard, obviously, growing up and from secular science and what we've grown up with. And so we've been told that between 60 to 230 million years ago, dinosaurs roamed the earth, and they never coexisted with man. And so, again, this is based on the assumption of flawed radiometric dating. And also the geological column. So I've already gone over those two things with you. But a huge monkey wrench was actually thrown into this theory when a paleontologist named Mary Schwartzer discovered a T-Rex dinosaur femur bone that still had soft tissue and blood cells in it. Soft tissues is one of the first things to go in the decomposing process and should never be found present in dinosaur fossils if they really are millions of years old. So in normal conditions found in nature, soft tissues cannot last more than 10,000 years. So this find baffled the scientific community, because what is this doing in dinosaur bones? And it got to the point where some people actually accused Schweitzer of making it up because it was impossible. This was impossible to find in dinosaur bones. So they accused this paleontologist that there's no way this is true, you must have made it up. However, it's only impossible if you're approaching it from the paradigm that believes that they are millions of years old, and that therefore is the only possible explanation. So when you have this paradigm of dinosaurs being that old, then anything that would go against that theory that we find through scientific observation, you're automatically just going to throw that out because you don't believe it's possible. But again, this isn't approaching it from a scientific mindset, it's approaching it from a religious one, because you're taking your belief system and you're interpreting the evidence from that belief system versus looking at the evidence and just going down the path that evidence takes you. And in this case, it's revealing that this dinosaur that they found with this is a much younger than they thought. But again, they're throwing that out because they don't believe that's possible. And so Mary Schweitzer even had one reviewer say the following. She said, I even had one reviewer tell me that he didn't care what the data said. He knew that what I was finding wasn't possible. And I wrote back and said, well, what data would convince you? And he said, none. There's no data that would convince me that these dinosaurs are thousands of years old. And so again, guys, that's not a scientific response. It's just not. And so it goes on and it says, the researchers also analyzed other fossils for the presence of soft tissue and found it was present in about half of their samples going back to the Jurassic period, which is supposedly 145 to 199 million years old. And so they started getting curious and they started like, man, where else are we going to find this? They never looked for it before. And so they start cutting some of these bones open. They start finding that there's more soft tissues in more of these dinosaur bones, which again should be absolutely impossible because that can't last longer than 10,000 years. So believing proteins could last more than 10 million or tens of millions of years, again, would take enormous faith to believe that. It takes enormous faith. It actually goes against the science. And so according to the report in Science Journal, the biochemist, even if collagen, which is connective tissues that make up several body parts, including like the tendons, ligaments, skins, and muscle, even if they were stored at 0 degrees Celsius, so at a perfect temperature, it would not be expected to last even 3 million years, let alone 60 to over 100 or 200. But again, such is the power of the evolutionary paradigm that many choose to believe the seemingly impossible rather than to accept the obvious implication that the samples simply are not as old as we've been told they are. And so, they're saying through this that even if you were to store something at this temperature, there's no way that it could last this long. So finding collagen and blood cells and soft tissue in dinosaur bones is just throwing a huge monkey wrench into it. And so the evolutionist response to this was that iron present, because they found iron in the bones, iron present in the dinosaur must have acted like formaldehyde and was responsible for the incredible preservation of these soft tissues. However, even if sealed and stored at the perfect temperature and in the perfect conditions with no exposure to insects and scavengers, the sun, or water, these soft tissues would still break down and go and be gone even after 1 million years. So when you think about it, the laws of chemistry and biology and everything else that we know say that this should be gone. It should be degraded completely. And that was a quote by Mary Schweitzer. So she's saying that everything that we know about what we've observed, it's telling us that these should be gone because they are so old, and yet they're not gone. So to date, formaldehyde is the best preservative that we know of, and yet it only slows down the decomposing process by a few hundred years. So this also begs the question, if it was discovered that iron was such a miraculous preservative, then why hasn't someone put a patent on it and made billions of dollars off the cryopreservation banks? If we found something that could preserve soft tissue for 70 million years or even 3 million years, then why isn't it in the latest version of Weider's functional histology, which is the textbook or the study of histology? And that's simply the study of microscopic structures of tissues and tissue relationships. If this was actually proven to be true, iron preservation would be replacing formaldehyde on every shelf across the world. And so saying that iron somehow amazingly preserved these dinosaur bones in the soft tissue within them is it's a grasping at straws for an explanation to still get your millions of years, even though, as Mary Schwartzer said, all that we know about biology and chemistry defies what we're viewing here if we really think it is millions of years old. The only explanation, and I'm not quoting Mary anymore now, but the only explanation for this is that these bones are not as old as we've been told. So since then, over 30 different specimens in different dinosaurs have been discovered, with more popping up regularly. So it's actually a lot more than this by now, because this was done in 2012. So there's way more than 30 now. But many dinosaur fossils include real bone. They are not completely mineralized, and so they're actually finding these dinosaur bones that aren't totally fossilized even. They're not rock yet. And what is found inside these dinosaur bones is a huge surprise again to many people. A series of discoveries since the early 1990s has revealed dinosaur bones with blood cells, hemoglobin, fragile proteins, and soft tissues such as flexible ligaments and blood vessels. And of special note, also DNA and radiocarbon. And so you can look at this. This is from a Triceratops, and you can actually go and watch this video for yourself. But they're taking those tweezers there, and they're literally like you can stretch the skin. Like it's still pliable. It's so preserved. And again, that is impossible for skin like that to last that long if it's really millions of years old. It's just absolutely impossible. But it is possible if it's thousands of years old. And so here's an actual list of a number of discoveries. It's not exhaustive. It's just a few, from going all the way back from 1966 to 2018, where they're finding all of these different substances like collagen and DNA and soft tissue and carbon-14. They're finding these things in bones and in animals that are supposed to be millions of years old. And so if you want, you can pause the video and go and look at these different discoveries. But this isn't even exhaustive. It's just a few of them. They keep finding more and more of these discoveries that, again, go against the narrative of what we've always been told. Here's a really cool one for you guys who are watching these videos and maybe you're in Calgary. This dinosaur is actually at the Royal Tyrrell Museum by Drumheller. And so, again, the scientific community was baffled at the discovery of the Nodosaur, this dinosaur, which was found perfectly intact, including its guts and skin. It was an enormous four-legged herbivore protected by spiky plated armor and weighing in at approximately 3,000 pounds. And this dinosaur that they have at the museum today is mummified. It's a mummified Nodosaur, and it's so intact that it still weighs 2,500 pounds. And so they said this at the museum. They said, "We don't just have a skeleton." Caleb Brown is a researcher at the Tyrrell Museum, and he told National Geographic, "We have a dinosaur as it would have been." So how the dinosaur mummy could remain so intact is still something of a mystery. This is what this guy is quoted as saying. Although, as CNN says, researchers suggest that the creature may have been swept away by a flooded river and carried out to sea, where it eventually sank. And over millions of years on the ocean floor, minerals took the place of the dinosaur's armor and skin, preserving it in the lifelike form now on display. And it's only a mystery if you believe it's millions of years old. He says it's something of a mystery that this thing could be so well preserved. But if it's not millions of years old and it's just thousands of years old, it's not a mystery at all. It's just not that old. And again, look at the language here, guys. It was swept away by a flooded river. You'll notice this language a lot. There's always water, a flood of some kind that is surrounding these different dinosaur finds that we have. And most of the time they think it was some kind of river that flooded or something. But I'm going to show you that the flood, it was far more reaching than some just localized river. It was across the globe. And the discoveries that we've made reveal that these dinosaurs died in water. And that's only possible if the whole area that they were in was flooded. And so I'm going to get more into that in a minute. But again, perhaps, this thing just simply isn't that old. And so there's just another picture I wanted to show you of it. Look at the plates on its back, like those spiky plates. Isn't that intense? It's pretty cool because we are seeing this dinosaur, as it would have been. And so again, you can go down to the Royal Tyrrell Museum and see this for yourself. But how about this, guys? Found in the 1970s. Did you know that 10 human skeletons were found in what they call the lower Cretaceous strata layer that is supposedly 140 million years old, where we find it's a layer we find a lot of dinosaur bones in. And so human skeletons were found buried with these dinosaurs. That means that they lived at the same time. And so the first question is, what are people doing buried with dinosaurs if they did never live at the same time as we've been told? That's not possible. This find alone shows that they lived at the same time. And the second question is, according to evolution, humans are only 300,000 years old. And yet we have human skeletons that are supposedly 140 million years old. And so again, guys, we're just seeing the narrative continually challenged that we have always been fed. These discoveries blow those things out of the water. But in the secular world, you don't hear about this stuff, which is, again, why I'm making these videos. Because I want to show you that the evidence out there for this other narrative that we've never heard, the amount of evidence out there is actually incredible. There's so much of it. I'm not grasping at straws here. There is a lot of evidence I'm going to continue to go through in this video that I think you'll be pretty interested in. Next one is human footprints in and beside dinosaur footprints, fossilized footprints of dinosaurs and humans side by side. And yet, according to the geological column, footprints, dinosaurs should, according to the layer that they're only supposed to be found in, they should be 20 to 50 miles under the Earth's surface. And here we have dinosaur bones and footprints on the surface. What are they doing so close to the surface? And what are they doing on the surface if they're really as old as we've been told, and they're really as far down in the geological column as we've been told? There's only a few places where you find dinosaurs that far down. Most of the discoveries are on the ground. They're, where a river might flood, like we had in Calgary in 2013. We had floods in Calgary, and the erosion washed away some of the riverbank, and they found dinosaur bones that were just buried in the riverbank that are right close to the surface. They're not that far down. That's how we find them. And so again, what we see in the geological column, the drawings that we have in our textbooks, is found in less than 1% of the Earth, the picture that you see. Most of the times you find them above and on the surface. But here, guys, is just another example of humans existing with dinosaurs. Just like God said to Job, the behemoth which I made alongside of you. And so in evolution, human footprints in dinosaur tracks are deadly, because it blows, again, evolution out of the water, the narrative that we've always been told, that we lived alongside dinosaurs, and that's very destructive for evolution, which is why a lot of the discoveries around this are kept pretty hush-hush, because they don't like this stuff coming out, because it throws their theory into the trash where I believe it belongs. So here's another interesting example. Look at the list of many of these fossils that they found in phosphate beds that were buried together, guys. These things are buried together. You would expect this if there was a worldwide flood. They found elephants, horses, monkeys, raccoons, dolphins, different kinds of dinosaurs, crocodiles, sand sharks, tiger sharks, swordfish, and then American First Nations. They found their jaws, teeth, arrowheads, brass. These were all found in the exact same layer. So what are modern animals like horses and monkeys and elephants and people doing buried in the same layer as dinosaurs? If dinosaurs existed millions of years before the horse did, or the elephant, or the human, right? What are they doing buried? This shows you guys emphatically that they lived at the exact same time. Modern animals that we have today, which never evolved, dinosaurs, which we don't have anymore, and people. They were all alive at the same time, and all in this case, where they find them in the same layer, they died at the same time and were rapidly buried. Because you can't get things fossilized unless they're in a watery environment, and they're buried very quickly before there's any chance for them to decay, rot, or get eaten by scavengers. That's, again, how we get fossils. They must be buried very quickly. Otherwise, they wouldn't turn into a fossil. It's not possible. And again, it also has to be within a watery environment. And here we see all of these things in the same layer together, only explained by a flood, and also making their evolution impossible, and the fact that they lived at different times impossible. So what about carbon-14 in dinosaurs? If you remember in my other video, I went through carbon-14. And carbon-14 cannot last for more than 50,000 years because it decays until it's eventually gone. You can watch my other video on radiometric dating if you missed it. It's just important background to have to understand carbon-14. I'm not going to go through it again. But it only lasts 50,000 years. And that means that it should never, ever, ever be found in dinosaur bones. If dinosaur bones really are millions of years old, you should never find carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. And yet, here is another list of impossible discoveries if dinosaur bones really are millions of years old. Here is a list of a whole bunch of dinosaurs that they found and continue to find with carbon-14. And they're generally dated as being between 20 to 40,000 years old. That should be absolutely impossible if dinosaurs are millions of years old. Researchers have found a reason for the puzzling survival of soft tissues and collagen in dinosaurs, and that is that the bones are younger than anyone ever guessed or imagined. Carbon-14 dating of multiple samples of bone from 8 dinosaurs found in Texas, Alaska, Colorado, and Montana revealed that they were only 22 to 39,000 years old. And so these researchers who are members of the Paleochronology group presented their findings at the 2012 Western Pacific Geophysics meeting in Singapore between August 13 and 17. And so the AGU and the AOGS are this conference that they were having where they presented these findings. And since dinosaurs are thought to be over 65 million years old, at least 65 million years old, the news is stunning, and honestly more than some could tolerate. So after the AOGS and AGU conferences in Singapore, the abstract where they mentioned these findings was removed from the conference website by 2 chairmen because they could not accept the findings. Unwilling to challenge the data openly, they erased the report from public view without a word to the authors who brought this presentation. So when the authors inquired about why it was taken down, the chairman replied, "We cannot accept these findings." We see yet again a paradigm that does not allow certain scientific findings that do not comply with an already established belief system. The finding of carbon-14 alone is enough observable scientific evidence to make any true, unbiased scientist take a second look at the theory of millions of years. And so, we see this throughout scientific secular history, if I could put it that way, where evidence that is good is again thrown out and tossed to the side simply because it doesn't line up with the evolutionary timescale. And that, my friends, is not science. So I'm going to show you some interesting discoveries we found with dinosaurs that are in the form of fossils and tracks and whatnot. But I just wanted to show you this picture, and I know I've gone through this before, but I just have to say it again because it's so important, that in order for fossilization to take place, animals must die in a watery environment and quickly become buried in mud and silt. And because of this requirement, most land creatures never get the chance to become fossilized unless they die next to a lake or stream. And even in the ocean, guys, it's you don't get fossils made in the ocean, even when they're in that watery environment with the present conditions of the oceans, because the animals will die and they'll fall to the bottom and then they get eaten. They don't get buried in mud or silt. They get eaten very quickly. And so even in watery environments today, it's still very rare to get fossils made because they're not buried in mud or silt quickly, which they have to be buried very quickly. And so the making of a fossil it should actually be a very rare thing. But it shouldn't be rare if there was a worldwide flood. And so the very fact that we have the billions of fossils all over the earth like we do reveal a worldwide flood where the waters rapidly come in, and with it they carry mud and silt and they bury things, and the waters increase, and then, when it talks about in the Bible that God caused a wind to blow and the waters began to recede. And so there's these mud and silt being washed around all over the place, and sediments are being laid up one upon another. Just like I said in my other video, you can go outside and you can take a glass jar and fill that glass jar with dirt, and then fill that with water, and you shake the jar really fast and you set it down. Within 30 seconds, you'll see these different layers form in the jar as the dirt begins to settle, and it settles in layers. You can see the layers for yourself, and that's exactly what we have in a worldwide flood. It's like the globe got shook and the water sloshed all these things around, killed everything, rapidly buried them, and then created all these fossils. And so you'd expect to find that if there was a worldwide flood, but you would not expect to find it if there wasn't a worldwide flood. You would find very rare little places where you'd find fossils here and there. You wouldn't find them at the scale we find them if there wasn't a worldwide flood. And that's a little bit interesting to me in the sense of what fossils actually reveal. There's a scripture in the Bible where it talks about the rocks crying out. And I think that's exactly what we have in the fossil record. These fossils, these bones that have been turned to stone, we have rocks crying out that God takes sin. He takes sin seriously, and it is judged. And the amazing thing about the gospel is that Jesus took on our judgment that we deserve so that we wouldn't have to be judged. He took our punishment and our judgment for us, and requires us now to trust in him and receive him and to turn away from our sin. And so the fossil record is crying out, repent, my friends, repent. God takes sin seriously, and it is judged. But receive his Son who took on your judgment for you so that you can go free. The fossil record is reminding us of the fact that we do need to honor and fear the Lord and receive the sacrifice his Son on our behalf. And so I think the fossil record is amazing in revealing the truth that the world really was flooded. And if we go back to the reason it was flooded, we see that it absolutely applies to our lives today, and we need to take that seriously. All right, so for the rest of this video, I'm going to show you some really cool discoveries that again reveal that these animals were killed because of a flood, and they also did not live as long ago as we have been told. And so you can see here, this is a very common dinosaur family that's actually found in Alberta, Canada, which is where I'm from. Which is kind of cool. And so, just like there's many different varieties of a dog, there are a lot of different varieties of the Centrosaurus, and so this is a Centrosaurus kind of dinosaur. And just like with dogs, within this kind, we see numerous varieties of this kind of dinosaur. And so the most famous Centrosaurus is the Triceratops. That's it's the largest, it's the commonest, and it's the most well known. And so the Centrosaurus is the family that the Triceratops belongs to. And so these are found abundantly in many different bone beds. One of the large Centrosaurus bone beds that they found a while back now is called BB43. It's what they call this dinosaur. So it's like a dinosaur graveyard. And the bed is located in the Badlands along the Red Deer River of Dinosaur Provincial Park, about 50 kilometers north of Brooks, Alberta. And so this is pretty close to my home. An early investigation of the BB43 summarized that at least 38 different kinds of Centrosauruses were killed in a yet-to-be-explained disaster. And so it's been shown that all the dinosaurs were killed by some kind of flood. They were killed by from being in a watery environment. And this dinosaur graveyard represents this huge watery catastrophe that rapidly buried tens of thousands of large dinosaurs. And there's something placed by Drumheller, which is another small town in Alberta, and it's called the Tyrrell Museum, and it's a dinosaur museum. And in this dinosaur museum, if you ever go there, you should really take a look at a lot of these different dinosaurs that they have that are what's called the death pose. And so a lot of these dinosaurs that were found in these mass graveyards are in this pose. And this pose is due to large flooding sweeping away the dinosaurs, causing their deaths. And in the process of drowning, they end up in this unique pose where their tails are extended and the heads are arched back, which is associated with brain damage and suffocation. These dinosaurs with their heads arched back are showing that they died because they drowned in water. And again, these are mass graves where when they find the full skeleton, it is more common than not to find these skeletons in this position, which again shows that they died because they drowned, which is exactly what would happen if we had a worldwide flood. Moving into America, there's what's called the Dinosaur Peninsula in northern Wyoming, Montana, and it even stretches up into Alberta, and it's in a few other states. But what's interesting about this peninsula is that it's the highest ground, like in America. And so there's, apart from the Rocky Mountains and whatnot, but it's a really high place where if there was a flood, this dinosaur peninsula that you can see in this picture would have been the last place where the water would have really fully covered the country of America way back in the day. When this happened about 4,400 years ago, when the flood took place, this high ground would have been one of the last places covered with water. And what's interesting about that is we find that there are mass dinosaur graveyards in this dinosaur peninsula, which is why they call it the Dinosaur Peninsula. But dinosaurs fled north as the waters rose from the south. And a massive dino graveyard was found in northern Montana that's over 1.2 miles long and contains over 30 million dinosaur fossil fragments. What they found in this dinosaur graveyard was 10,000 maiasaurs, which were found to be simultaneously killed and rapidly buried together. They found 10,000 of these dinosaurs. Now, you can see this picture, there's the babies are with the adult. But what was really interesting about this find is that none of the dinosaurs were young. They all were between 9 and 23 feet. So 0 young were found in this graveyard of 10,000 dinosaurs. This reveals that these adults were fleeing for their lives and left their young behind. And so as these floodwaters are rising up, as the flood is beginning to sweep into the mainland, these dinosaurs are booking it for high ground. And they leave their young behind because they're running for their lives. And that's exactly what we would expect to find if there was a worldwide flood. And it is what we find. We find these mass graveyards of all kinds of different animals buried together, and they're all very convoluted. Like they're all very concentrated in these areas where they fled to get away from the waters, and when the waters finally overtook them, they all died together in a similar location. And that again is where high ground was, exactly what we'd expect to find if there really was a worldwide flood. So if we go just 170 miles northeast of that location, we have one of the world's largest dinosaur graveyards, one of the largest ones in the world. And you might not be able to make it out in this picture, I apologize for that, but I'm just showing you that there's a snapshot of a science magazine that came out describing this place, and you can see the rain clouds in the picture because they know that all these animals died again because of a flood. There was a flood that took these animals out, and the Science magazine is, referring to that. So what's interesting about this graveyard is that thousands of centrosaurs are buried in 14 mega bone beds over an entire square mile. And so an entire square mile is nearly 500 football fields. And so thousands were killed and buried simultaneously by a flood. If we move just 45 miles northwest of that location, there is another massive graveyard with 49 different species of dinosaurs. And it's over a 13-mile stretch where there's this mass graveyard. So 49 different species of dinosaurs are found here. Along with these dinosaurs are turtles, crocodiles, fish, birds, and small mammals. Isn't that interesting? Buried with dinosaurs. There's turtles and crocodiles and fish and birds and small mammals that we have today buried with these dinosaurs. So what kind of event could bury almost 50 different kinds of animals that would not normally be so near to each other, including marine life, in one mass grave on high ground? And these mass graves are common in the U.S., but they're on these. They're the most common where the ground is the highest, right? And so again, we would expect to find that. And what are again all these different mammals and all these different animals that would normally not be together, including marine life, by the way? What are dolphins doing buried, with mammals and buried with dinosaurs, land dinosaurs, all in the same area in this mass grave? It's where the waters were getting rushed in, carrying marine life with it, and then burying these animals that have all fled to this high ground, trying to get away from it. And the waters and the land animals are all coming together in one place and burying everything to give them a final resting place on what the high ground was. And so again, this is just going to show through paleontology that the flood absolutely covered the United States. And it's what we would expect to find if that really did take place. In February 2015, geologists Tracy Thomas and Mary Drosser, in an article published online by the journal Geology, released graphic evidence for the reality of Noah's flood. In the Geological Society of America press release, it shows a sandstone block sitting vertically in the field with tracks running for a few meters across its surface. And you can see that in the picture there. These are interpreted as swimming tracks because the imprints represent only one part of the foot. And so consequently, it is assumed that the animal was being supported by water. And so Thomas and Dross explain how this works. Swim tracks are a unique type of vertebrate track because they are produced underwater by buoyant track makers, and specific factors are required for their production and subsequent preservation. So swim tracks are found all over the world, which consist of claw marks made on the sand surface as the animal was on its tiptoes trying to move through deep flowing water. And so it's kind of like, when you guys go out to a pool and you're slowly getting deeper and deeper and you get onto your tippy toes and then you finally can't touch it all. That's exactly what these tracks are portraying, that these animals are moving through this water that's rising and flowing because there's certain conditions that have to be in play for these tracks to be fossilized. They got to make these tracks, and then those tracks got to get buried with sediment very quickly with rapidly flowing water. And so these dinosaurs are swimming and they're trying to get away from the rising waters and to the point where they can't touch anymore, and again they begin to drown, and which is another reason why we find so many of these dinosaur bones with their head arched back in the death pose that I already showed you, because they drowned. And we find these tracks all over the world. One of the more famous places where you can see the tiptoe tracks are in northern Spain, and in this picture, the Lake Quarry, which is in central western Queensland of Australia. And so it's world famous for what they call the dinosaur stampede, which has been imprinted in these rocks. They actually found this and then built a museum around it. And so upon close examination, scientists concluded the tracks were made by dinosaurs that were fleeing rapidly rising water. Rapidly rising water. And so, in all this, guys, we just see that the dinosaurs were killed by and large by a flood, like so many other animals were. And the question is, well, what happened to them after the flood? And there are a number of different theories to what took place after the flood. But one that I found interesting for the larger dinosaurs is a theory that I personally tend to believe, and that is this. When you look at a Apatosaurus, they are 80 feet tall. Like, they're enormous in size. And the interesting thing about them is that they have the same size nostrils as our current horses do. So horses that we see today, their nostrils are the same size. And I don't know if you'll remember or not, but a number of videos ago, I talked about how they found petrified tree sap, which is amber, and within that amber they found air sacs, and they tested the air sacs, and the air sacs contained 35% oxygen, which is very different than the 21% oxygen that we have in our atmosphere today. And so if you were if this Apatosaurus were to be alive today, its nostrils are not big enough to take in the amount of oxygen its enormous lungs would need to be able to breathe and survive at only 21% oxygen. However, if there was more oxygen in our atmosphere before, this dinosaur would be able to breathe no problem. But today it would suffocate. And so for some of these larger dinosaurs, the atmosphere was so dramatically changed after the flood that I believe it's very plausible that the bigger dinosaurs couldn't survive in the changed atmosphere that was in the post-flood world. And so that's the one that I believe, because again, this dinosaur couldn't live today. And so I think some of the bigger ones just couldn't survive in the environment. However, I do believe that a number of dinosaurs did survive the flood. I do believe that there were some on the ark. And it's very plausible that there were baby animals that were on the ark. You can't see that in Scripture, but you can't not see it in Scripture. And so it's just another theory. But what's kind of neat is when we look through human history, we see people interacting with dinosaurs in ancient times. And so I'm going to show you a few things that I think are really interesting in regards to people that made different art that are showing dinosaurs, that they're using a lot of detail that would be very difficult to have just going off of a few bones that they would have found in the dirt. And so I'm going to show you some of these. This is Mississippian culture, southwest United States. This dinosaur-like thing was found that is dated to be 800 and 1500 AD. And then in southern Italy, you can see a Stegosaurus. This is from around the 8th century. And so if humans never saw dinosaurs, then why do so many people groups across the world who lived a long time ago describe these things so well? And that's what you're going to continue to see as I go through some of these discoveries. If you look at this one, there's a pre-Inca Indian riding a dinosaur. He's literally riding on a dinosaur. And this is an ancient stone. There's actually about 8 of these that they have found. And they're found in Pensacola. They were found in Pensacola, Florida. Here's another one where this stone depicts a dinosaur with circles on its side. Why did whatever natives drew this picture of this dinosaur? Look at the detail on it. Why did they draw circles on the side? That was just kind of like, oh well, maybe they were just being artistic. But this kind of got turned into something even a lot more interesting when they discovered a number of years later that there was fossilized dinosaur skin that they had found for the first time, and it has circles on it. You can see it in the picture. Sorry, this picture is a bit grainy. It's not the best one. I tried to get better clarity, but again, you guys can look this stuff up for yourselves and see a better picture. But you could only draw these circles on dinosaur skin if you had actually seen them. And when we have found fossilized dinosaur skin, it has the circles on it that resemble the circles that are in drawings that people have done a long time ago. And so you obviously could never find what a dinosaur skin was like just by looking at bones, just like we can't today. They couldn't back then either. But you could tell if you had actually seen one. And again, guys, I'm just showing you something that I know is so contradictory to what we've always been told. But that doesn't mean that what we've always been told is right. And so that's why I want to show you this to you guys, because there is a lot of evidence that dinosaurs did not live nowhere near as long ago as we've been told, and that they did live with people. Here's another picture south of Rome, 2nd century. Here's a bunch of guys that are going after a dinosaur. They're hunting a dinosaur. Here's from the Shang Dynasty in China. This looks like one of these dinosaurs. 206 BC to 220 AD, the one on the right. Another depiction of a dinosaur with great detail, by the way. The Han Dynasty. Here's in Mexico, they found all of these ancient figures that some of the First Nations in Mexico had made. Some of it was pottery, and some were actual toy dinosaurs, like we would give our kids today. They found hundreds of these things, and it's like a massive dinosaur collection, again, done with detail. It's in their pottery. Why are they showing these things in their pottery and drawing them on their vases and making toys of them if they never saw them? It just doesn't make any sense, and again, they're doing it with detail. Here's another one from Utah. This was dated 150 BC to 1200 AD. That is a long-necked dinosaur, right? And in England, 1946 or 1496, AD, they found some of these things. And again, you might have to pause the video to get a good look at these pictures, but they're depicting dinosaurs very clearly. Or go to the Buddhist temple. Look at that Stegosaurus. That's in part of the stone entrance to their city. Or the temple in Nepal. Look at that Triceratops. Like, again, crazy detail. And why are they depicting these dinosaurs in all of these places, again, if they never actually saw them? If they're dead and buried way, way under the ground, how would they even know that they existed at all? Even finding their bones should be rare, right? Let alone being able to depict them with this kind of detail. Here's Peru. Again, a bunch of dinosaur in their pottery and in their art, in their vases, in their bowls, in their cups. We find this stuff all over. And so without any tools of archaeology or paleontology, these ancient 1,000-year-old cultures depicted autonomically accurate dinosaurs. How? The only explanation is that they actually saw them. And I just showed you a few guys. You can look up this stuff and you'll find that there's way more than I even showed you. But again, we are seeing evidence that people have lived alongside dinosaurs, just like God said to Job in Job 40. And so, again, the reason that we believe that they're really millions of years old goes back to what I've brought up many times, which is the principle of uniformitarianism, which is that the present is the key to the past. And so the way things are going today are the way things have always gone, and they don't take into account catastrophic events, like I've gone over with you many times. They believe that the way things are going today are the way things have always gone. And what I haven't done, I've been kind of waiting to show you this, is I wanted to show you a pretty interesting prophecy that Peter gives us in 2 Peter chapter 3. And Peter actually talks about this theory coming out in the last days, the principle of uniformitarianism. And this is where he says it, 2 Peter 3, 3-5. Most assuredly, I want to remind you that in the last days, scoffers will come, mocking the truth and following their own desires. They will say, what happened to the promise of Jesus coming again? And here's uniformitarianism. For from the times of our ancestors, everything has remained the same since the world was first created. Everything we see happening today is the way it's always happened. That is the definition of uniformitarianism. They deliberately forget that God made the heavens long ago by the word of his command, and that he brought the earth out from the water and surrounded it with water. Then he used the water to destroy the ancient world with a mighty flood. Guys, this is fascinating. Peter is prophesying that in the last days, there's going to be these scoffers who come, they mock the truth, and they say everything has remained the same since the world was first created. And it's in the context of understanding it's God who made the heavens and the earth, and it's also God who flooded the whole earth with a flood. That's the context of this scripture. He's saying the last days they're going to come out with this, and this is what they're going to be saying. And ever since the late 1700s to early 1800s to present, this is exactly what we have seen. Scoffers coming out and saying, creationists, you believers, yeah, as if, you guys are crazy to believe that God really made everything. Don't you know that the world is really millions and millions of years old, and there was never a worldwide flood that took place? That's all just fairy tales in a story. That never actually happened. And they're going to mock it, and they're going to deliberately forget that it is God is the one who has made the heavens and the earth, and they declare his glory. And he was the one that flooded the earth with water, because he does take sin seriously. And Peter is prophesying that this is exactly what was going to take place in the last days. So the very fact that we have uniformitarianism coming out in the last 100 years goes again to show, guys, that we are indeed living in the last days, and this prophecy is being fulfilled in secular science all around us. And so anyway, guys, this is my video on dinosaurs. I had so much more to add, but I didn't. It's already almost an hour, and so I'm gonna cut it off. But you can look into these things for yourself. The world reveals that there was a flood that covered it all over the place. It's everywhere we look, and the fossil record is a reminder. The rocks are crying out that that is what took place. And so I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.